Ladies and gentlemen, it's time for us to do a bit of a breakdown, a bit of an analysis of an unreleased kit in Wuthering Waves. As you're all familiar with some of the past kit releases that we've done for units like Qiuyuan, Games typically puts in the information of the second half character into the game. And the way that we would have seen it before is through actually the Crossing Stars gallery. But what you're going to notice is that somebody's not actually showing up. And it turns out that Qiuyuan Games went ahead and adjusted the mechanics of how certain information becomes available so that upcoming featured resonators and weapons aren't shown until their event goes live. Bit of a barrier for us, but fortunately, he actually shows up in the middle of the main story quest, and we've got some photos of everything that he does. So without further ado, let's just go ahead, get right on into it, and start breaking all of his stuff down. When it comes to Qiuyuan, this is what he's looking like in the main screen menu. I don't think there's too much for us to really take a look at over here because this is like a trial character meant for story purposes, and so his stats are awful. But we're able to click in and take a look at his combat rolls. And so what you're going to see over here is Concerto efficiency, so he has a fast rotation. He deals heavy attack damage, so the Law of Harmony set is right there for you. And the big one, a stat that has not shown up in the game before ever in a character's kit, Echo skill damage amplification. And you'll see that he has a very specific source of this buff. It's on his outro skill, so you can imagine what his role is going to be in game. And so this is just what it's looking like over here when it comes to his maxed out skill tree. Thankfully, we'll be able to see the high motion values available. Or, sorry, not necessarily the high motion values, but the motion values and the scalings available in his kit. And one thing to keep in mind is that Qiuyuan, I think, has intentionally decided not to show the kits for maybe just one reason. They might be doing a bit of work to either rebalance his numbers or, you know, go ahead and take a look at how some of his mechanics are looking and then modify them before release. That's why we're just making sure to include that this is what it looks like in-game on the 9th of October. And he does come out way later in the month, around the 30th. So do keep that in mind when it comes to the information that's going to be covered here. We'll make sure to do an updated take once the official information does come out, because I do believe this means it's subject to change. First things first, let's just take a look at his normal attack. This is just going to be a basic 3-hit attack chain over here for his, well, basic attack. I don't think you're going to be using this that often, but we'll see. He's then going to have a heavy attack as well that's going to consume stamina, attack the target, deal arrow damage, and if he presses a normal attack after a specific period of time, after the heavy attack, then he'll use Thus Spoke the Blade Inkwash Stage 4. A unique type of basic attack that you're clearly seeing. His first one doesn't really have stages. You'll see more about this later on in his Forte Circuit. Next, he's going to have a mid-air attack, just a regular plunge, and then he's also going to have a special dodge counter, one of the most interactive ones in the game. So you're going to go ahead, press a normal attack after a successful dodge to attack the target. It's going to be considered a heavy attack, so you do want to use these. And then moments after a basic or heavy attack, Qiuyuan becomes immune to the next instance of damage he takes and casts a dodge counter upon being attacked, dealing arrow damage and, of course, having that heavy attack modifier. One of my mods, Kaiser, actually went ahead and decided to demonstrate what this looks like in-game, so we'll just take a quick look at that. So, as you can see over there, has a very similar sort of like timing or like a cadence to a lot of the other parries in the game. Think about something like a Zani using like her skill, all of that. This is the kind of like interactivity you got. And it like lines up with him taking a sip of his bev. So maybe the alcohol really is the key over here to not taking damage in combat in this game. That's just what it looks like over there. There are other ways to activate that as well, and we'll make sure to cover it. So when it comes to his basic attack over here, you're clearly seeing a lot of very, very interesting stuff actually going on. There are going to be some chainings that are going to be available. And like I said before, you're going to see more of this in the Forte Circuit. Now, moving on to the Resonance skill. You're going to press the Resonance skill through the groves to dash forward for a distance, deal arrow damage, and that damage is going to actually be considered as Echo skill damage. And if the Resonance skill is cast upon being attacked by a target enemy, he becomes immune to this instance of damage, stagnates nearby enemies, and then gains interruption resistance while using his resonance skill. You can see over here, we already talked about the parry mechanic that's built into his lingering animations after his basic attack and heavy attack. He's going to have a similar sort of mechanic going on over here with his resonance skill. Once again, he does seem to have a lot of very, very, very interesting, very, 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 very appealing on-field mechanics built into his kit. He's also going to have Undaunted Wayfarer. He's going to hold the resonance skill to dash for a distance at the cost of stamina, deal arrow damage to the target that's considered once again as echo skill damage, and if there are no targets nearby, Qiuyuan will leap up and dash through the air. That's kind of like the bamboo run that he does. We saw that a fair bit in the trailer. That's where this kind of like stamina consumption is. That's kind of like how that super cool overworld mechanic actually works. You're going to be holding down the resonance skill button to get it all done. One thing that I just want to comment on before we move forward too much is, well, there's a bit of a situation going on over here, as you can imagine, with this guy's scalings, specifically on his basic attack. Like I said before, I don't think he's actually intended to use these super often, and you can see that he's got some pretty great scalings over here, specifically on his dodge counter. This looks like one of the highest damaging dodge counters in the game, if I'm frankly being honest. This is about a 300% motion value on the ability, so I wouldn't read too much into the actual numbers that you're seeing here right now for the basic attack. You need to know what attacks characters are using the most in their actual kit. And you can see over here, this one's got quite the whop. It deals more than like his entire basic attack chain combined. It's up there with Chisha, it's up there with Camellia's. And by what I mean by it's up there with Camellia's, Camellia has one of the best dodge counters in the game. And the scaling on that one looks 99.4 times 3. And Brother Man over here has got something really, really, really similar when it comes to his calculations. That's just something that I wanted to keep in mind. You can see his resonance skill doesn't scale that well either, but as you can see, it doesn't really look like an ability that's, you know, it's got a pretty short cooldown, 14 seconds, use it like once a rotation. I think it's meant more so for the survivability and the mobility over here. Now, let's take a look at the Forte Circuit. And I think this is where stuff is going to be a lot more clear because, well, he's got his own special basic attack built in, and there's a lot of text going on. So let's start breaking this one down. When Qiuyuan reaches 200 points of Swordster's Silicy, that's going to be hard to pronounce. I do believe that's his Forte Circuit. His basic attack is replaced with basic attack Thus Spoke the Blade Inkwash, which chains together up to 4 consecutive strikes, dealing arrow damage that's considered as heavy attack damage. Do recall, right, that Qiuyuan is going to be a character that utilizes Law of Harmony. And this is also a set that has heavy attack bonuses when you use echo skills, and then also is going to buff the team's damage to deal echo skills. So over here, it's really good to have abilities in his kit that scale off of heavy attack damage. And that's why when I was talking about the basic attack before, the one that we're seeing up here, right, the scalings aren't too much of a concern, because all these deal is basic attack damage. They don't actually deal heavy attack. They're not going to benefit from the Sonata set, and what you'll see later on, from his weapon either. That's something important that you're going to have to keep in mind. That's going to chain together up to 4 times over here. I'm just looking at the scalings overall on this attack, and let's just be honest, it looks a fair bit better. It does look a fair bit better than that initial attack chain that we were looking at. Now, he's going to have a secondary part of his Forte Circuit called Bamboo's Shade. When Qiuyuan reaches 400 points of Swordster's Silicy, he gains the Bamboo Shade effect, granting all nearby active resonators in the team 30% echo skill damage. So yeah, if you're on field, 30% echo skill damage right there. Next up, Ink Splash of Mind. When Swordster's Silicy is full, and you can see it over here, Qiuyuan enters the Ink Splash of Mind state for 8 seconds. So this is kind of like his super powered up mode, during which heavy attack is replaced with Thus Spoke the Blade to save. And in this state, hold the normal attack button to consume all of his Forte Circuit to perform heavy attack, Thus Spoke the Blade to teach, Thus Spoke the Blade to save, and then Thus Spoke the Blade to sacrifice in order, all dealing arrow heavy attack damage. And so this is what you're seeing over here. Pretty decent looking attacks, pretty decent looking scalings. It's ironic that the first hit of the Forte Circuit seems like it's dealing the most actual damage. That is kind of like how advanced his kit gets, and that's how it starts like building up. Now, let's start taking a look at what other bonuses he's going to have related to this ability. Performing all 3 of these attacks, like we said before, they're considered as heavy attack damage, but each hit of this Forte Circuit will also count as casting an Echo skill. And this is one of the most important parts about his kit. They're heavy attack damage, but when used, will count as Echo skills. And that means, well, that's how you're going to trigger, ladies and gentlemen, that Law of Harmony set that we were talking about before. Because you have to be able to cast Echo skills to be able to actually stack up this buff. And of course, gain this heavy attack damage bonus as well. This has even more consequences in game because of a couple of things, right? There are some units in the game, specifically Forlova and Galbraina, that heavily benefit from having a character that can, well, cast Echo skills. If you just look at a character like Forlova over here, you can see over here, Forlova gains a stat called Aftersound whenever teammates trigger Hecate's enhanced attacks. And to trigger Hecate's enhanced attacks, you need to be able to cast an Echo skill. The enhanced attacks deal quite a bit of damage, and Aftersound gives you a lot of bonuses, crit damage, as well as, well, let's just be entirely real here, even more multipliers on your attacks. So there's a lot of great benefits to having a lot of Echo skill casts in a Forlova team, and it does look like Qiuyuan, right, as well as Cantarella, combining them together will have around 8 Echo skills that can help fuel all of the different stacking mechanics in her kit. Another character with some stacking mechanics is, of course, going to be Galbraina, because of how the Afterflame mechanic actually works in her kit. She can store up to 40 points, and when she isn't in Demon Hypostasis, isn't in her DPS mode, each Echo skill cast by a teammate gives her 8 out of 40 stacks. In a regular team, she can get 24 out of 40. She needs 2 more additional Echo skills. Qiuyuan comes in, and he's going to have 4 available. So you can see over here, Qiuyuan is already going to be a very, very, very competitive character because of his Echo skill buffing on Law of Harmony, but also the fact that he has those multiple Echo skills to fuel both these characters' kits. So that's another thing to keep in mind. And this Afterflame is super important for Galbraina because, well, she gains a damage bonus. All of her attacks in Demon Hypostasis will deal up to 1.5% more damage for each point of Afterflame that you have. So at 40 points, maxed out, 60% more damage, which is, I mean, let's be real here. That's quite a lot. That's some of the specifics when it comes to his Forte Circuit. This whole Swordster Soliloquy, the whole, you know, stacking it all up to be able to deal that damage, because let's just be real here. It seems like it's going to be a pretty important stat to have. We can clearly see over here that Qiuyuan is a bit of a tailored support, but it does look like, at least from the mechanics that I'm seeing, that he should have his own on-field potential. He seems more similar to me to a Yuno than he is a Yuno or a Brant than he is a Yinlin or a Jeja, right? Those are characters that are more like pure sub-DPSs that don't really have any on-field capabilities. This guy already has, you know, the built-in parry. He's got the iframes, the stagnation, all of that. And, of course, these resources and some pretty cool-looking animations. Now, let's start taking a look more at what Swordster Soliloquy actually is. He can hold up to 600 points of it. 100 points after he performs the 3rd stage of his basic. 100 points when performing each stage of Inkwash. And then 100 points when performing a dodge counter. And I think that's one of the big ones, right? He gets actively incentivized, gets to the highest damaging parts of his kit from, well, using attacks like this. He's also going to get 400 points of Swordster Soliloquy after using an intro skill. And he can only hold up to 600. So you're seeing over here, oh boy, he's actually able to reach this Forte Circuit really, really, really fast and start casting those Echo skills really, really, really fast. And, well, that's why he has the Concerto efficiency. Now, when it comes to some of the additional stipulations of Swordster Soliloquy, it cannot be obtained while you're in the Ink Splash state of mind, so you can't get more points when it's full. That makes sense to me. And Swordster Soliloquy is cleared when Ink Splash of Mind state ends, and that lasts 8 seconds. I don't know what kind of like crazy stuff people are cooking up, but I think there's probably potential to use like multiple Forte circuits, extend his rotation for longer than 8 seconds. Maybe that's why all of these additional ways of building it up are in his kit, and his intro skill gives so much so he can cast it immediately. We'll just have to see the kind of gameplay that he's capable of once, you know, he's like fully built and all of that, and is in, you know, some of his more tailored teams. Now let's take a look at his resonance liberation. Sundering Strike. Deal arrow damage to targets within range, considered as echo skill damage. And for every 1% of Qiuyuan's crit rate over 50%, this skill increases the crit damage of all nearby resonators in the team by 2% for 30 seconds, up to 30%. And so, I'm just looking at this. The ability itself doesn't have the best motion values ever, but I would say for the resonance energy cost of only 125, and the fact that it's providing this, I'm going to be real here, pretty impressive buff to everybody on the team, looks pretty damn good to me, to be honest. And I would say the only real thing that I have a bit of an issue with is the fact that it only applies to nearby active resonators in the team, so I do think you need to be on field to actually get this one working. And it's also going to be considered as echo skill damage, which also means that, well, it's not going to scale with heavy attack. What we were just talking about before is the fact that, you know, he's meant to be used on the Law of Harmony set. But the thing is, the Law of Harmony set gives you a heavy attack damage bonus. And yes, it gives you up to 16% echo skill damage after you stack up and do some of those or stack up and use some of those abilities. But let's just be entirely real here. I'm pretty sure he would be dealing significantly more damage if this was also considered as just heavy attack damage, because as you'll see from some of the other things he has available, it's kind of significant. We can see that there's buffing built into here. He's probably naturally going to want around 80% crit rate. He's probably going to want around 80% crit rate just to be able to, you know, go ahead and get all of this damage done. Remember that he is also going to have a buff. When he intro skills in, he's immediately going to give everybody in the team 30% echo skill damage if you're on field, because that's when you're at 400 points of Soliloquy. He gets 400 points immediately when intro skilling in. So it will still get buffed if you use it like the second after he enters the field. So that's another thing to keep in mind. He still does have some self buffs available over here. So it's not like he's, you know, rocking 0% echo skill damage. Now let's keep moving on and take a look at his intro skill. He's going to attack the target, deal arrow damage. It's going to be considered as heavy attack damage. And within a certain period of time after using this skill, press the normal attack button to perform basic attack, thus Spoke the Blade Inkwash, stage 3. And do keep in mind, thus Spoke the Blade Inkwash is the one built into his Forte Circuit. So as you're seeing over here, he intro skills in, he's at 400. There's basically almost no situation that you're actually going to use his regular baseline basic attacks. You're probably noticing this by now across his gameplay. You might use like 1 or 2 of them. You can replace them with dodge counters, but basically everything in his kit is like prompting you to not use these ones that often. So once again, the scaling on these looking like kind of dog shit, probably not the biggest deal ever. Because once again, guys, almost everything in his kit is shortcutting to a different part of the kit. Now let's take a look at his outro skill. And this one is going to be, it might upset some people, but you probably will understand who this is intended for. Attack the target, deal arrow damage equal to 100% of Qiuyuan's attack that's considered as echo skill damage, and then grant a 50% echo skill damage amplification to the incoming resonator, lasting for 14 seconds, or until the resonator is swapped out. This is why I've been saying he's kind of like an echo skill damage version of Yuno. I think he provides more buffs overall than Yuno does, and so his overall personal damage might be a bit lower, but this is basically just Yuno's outro skill, which is 50% heavy attack damage amplification, but this one's for echo skill damage dealers. Unfortunately, there's kind of only one situation where this outro skill is really doing a lot. And that's specifically when you're pairing it with Galbrina. Because Galbrina is the only on-field echo skill damage dealer in the game. However, there's also a chance that there's going to be more on-field echo skill damage dealers in the game released at some point. Much like how Yuno is one of the most flexible characters in the game, right? Because of her general heavy attack outro skill buff, you can just slot her in with almost every single heavy attacker in the game. You can use her for a DPS Dan Jin, you can use her with Galbrena, you can use her with obviously Augusta, you can use her with Qiuyuan, you can even use her with Zadi and Phoebe. That's what having a non-attribute base, just straight up 50% outro skill buff is able to do. When you think about it from like a value perspective and like a kit design perspective, this is a significant part of his power budget, right? But this also makes him, in my opinion, one of the most future-proof units in the game. Because as far as I'm concerned, he should, for the foreseeable future, have the largest echo skill damage amplification buff in the game. Because 50% is like the new best in slot, right? Nobody has anything better than this. Yuno looks like she's going to have a ton of longevity because of having something similar to this, and it looks like it's going to be the same for Qiuyuan. So if you're thinking about, something that's going to have value for you in the future, I don't really know what else could potentially have higher value if you like the echo skill mechanic and you plan on fleshing it out further on your account. However, the inverse is also going to be the case. If you don't like the echo skill damage archetype, you don't like how it's like, forming out, you don't like the characters that are in it, then there's, again, no reason for you then to actually pull this guy or interact with it, right? If you just don't feel like echo skills are your thing, then this just makes him one of the easiest skips ever. My point of view is, if you're looking to, again, have a character that feels like they're going to be relatively future-proof, have a lot of value later on, and is going to, extend usability into the future. He's got echo skill damage amplification, the highest one in the game, also the only one in the game. He's also going to have a 30% crit damage buff available as well. Then he's also going to have a 30% echo skill damage buff. That's quite a few pretty consistent, pretty powerful buffs that are going to be in his kit. Now, let's start reading a little bit more. Let's start getting into his inherent skills. And this is where stuff is going to get a little bit spicy. Qiuyuan is going to obtain Quietude Within for 10 seconds upon entering the Ink Splash state of mind. Remember, that's the one when he's at max Forte Circuit stacks. This effect can be triggered once every 22 seconds. Heavy Attack, Thus Spoke the Blade, to teach, to save, and to sacrifice, deal 50% more damage, and will additionally restore 30 points of Concerto energy on hit on the final one. So, as you're seeing over here, yeah, he just has like a 50% attack buff on, or 50% damage buff on these abilities as well, once every 22 seconds. So, that's going to give him a nice little boost of damage. This effect is also going to end early if you use Qiuyuan in Quick Swap. But like we said before, he should be able to get to a max Forte really fast when you consider that the max cap is 600 points and his intro skill gives him 400 points. Now let's take a look at inherent skill number 2. Drink Away Woe's Age. Oh, that's such a crazy name. When casting an echo skill, Qiuyuan's bamboo flask absorbs the overflowing energy and brews it into flowing Panacea. The next time Sorcerer's Soliloquy is obtained, the flowing Panacea is consumed to gain a 10% attack increase for 20 seconds. I don't know why they decided to make it sound so complicated. They could have just been like, it's just after you use an echo skill, gain 10% attack. I don't even know what this is. It's like, it's such an overly complicated point of view on it. Before I move on to the sequence notes, just a review of the inherents real fast. He's got, naturally, right, a lot of built-in damage buffs over here. And that's why I'm saying he's kind of like similar to a Yuno from what's actually going on. All of his inherents are entirely focused on boosting his personal damage. But it's no lie at all that he has a lot of team-wide buffs built into his kit or his other abilities. So it does make sense that these inherents are more personal damage based because of all the other stuff that we already saw. Now let's take a look at his sequence notes. All of his Forte enhanced attacks, right? The ones where he's at max Sorcerer's Soliloquy, they're not gonna be able to get interrupted. And he's also going to gain a just flat 20% crit rate increase. Do recall that his crit damage buff is based on his crit rate over 50%. So this is going to make it even easier to reach those numbers. His second one is going to go ahead and give him an additional 30% echo skill damage amplification to all nearby active resonators in the team. That's kind of a big one. That's a big buffing sequence node. And do keep in mind that Bamboo Shade isn't his outro skill. Bamboo Shade is actually the buff that he gives when he reaches 400 points of Swordster's Siliquate. And like I said before, he immediately gains 400 points of those when he uses an intro skill. So his second, if you really wanted like the actual impact of this, the second he enters the field, he gains a 30% echo skill damage amplification to the on-field resonator. And well, think about it this way. That looks like a team buff, but when you consider that all of this damage in his kit is considered echo skill damage, well, that's a team buff, but it's also a pretty significant personal damage buff as well. So that's another cool thing that's going to be built into there. And now for sequence node number 3, I think this is where stuff is going to get a little bit wild. The damage multiplier of Resonance Liberation is going to be increased by 500%. If Concerto energy is full when not in the ink splash of Mind State, Qiuyuan's resonance skill is going to be replaced with Straw Cape in Drizzly Rain, which is going to be available every 20 seconds. And upon using this, the Quietude Within effect immediately ends. 60 Concerto energy is consumed to deal arrow damage equal to 500% of Qiuyuan's attack. So this looks like a damage sequence. This looks like it gives him the ability to like consume Concerto energy similar to Camellia. Get like a bit of like some ephemeral action going on to extend his rotation time. That's basically like a new capability that gets unlocked in his kit from doing that. I do think it's a little bit interesting to basically give him like a DPS mode. It feels like this is like giving him a bit of like a DPS mode that extends his rotation naturally, right? But it's not built into his baseline kit. And this could potentially be one of the reasons for why Kuro is going ahead and delaying how his kit is showing up in Crossing Stars. Because, ladies and gentlemen, there's genuinely a chance that they might just change this to add it into his baseline kit. I'm not entirely sure if that's something that they want to do, but I do think it is a bit off that he seems to have an entirely new ability locked behind sequence nodes that essentially, right, allows his rotation to play more of an on-field DPS at the cost of increasing his rotation time. Some might ask why that's just not built into his baseline kit, and naturally, right, you could just have his S3 make it much stronger. So that's my personal take on it, especially when he already has all these built in, you know, he's got like the parries, you know, he's got like all these mechanics and stuff like that. And of course, his animations look absolutely fantastic. That's just my personal take on these. I'll wait and see, because like I said before, I think Kuro's deciding to wait because this technically gives them more time to finalize a kit. And this might be one of the reasons why. We'll see, though. His S4 is just going to be a 20% attack increase. I mean, that's cool. And then his S5 is going to be ignore 15% of the target's defense when dealing damage. A lot of people are saying S4 and S5 look like dog shit. Honestly, I think they're pretty decent overall when you consider the rest of his other nodes. These actually look fine. You should look at some of the other S5s in the game.
Oh, Yuno's S4 is really useful.
I'd rather have 20% attack than whatever the fuck this is. I'd rather have 15% defense ignore than whatever this is. Like, let's not be over here talking like these are the worst ones you've ever seen. They're actually better than 90% of the ones in the game when it comes to S4s and S5s. So let's stop being goofy over here. Now, let's get on into S6. Casting Heavy Attack thus spoke the blade to sacrifice. That's actually the last hit in his special Forte sequence. It's going to stagnate nearby targets for 5 seconds, or until the targets are damaged, or until Qiuyuan switches off the field. This effect is not available in co-op mode. I don't know. Maybe this is another reason why, like, it's not in-game yet. Like, that sounds like pay to lose. These three seem like fucked up. I'm gonna be honest over here. Like, I feel like it's these three are the reasons why. The entire first part of a sequence node, it's basically a 5 5-second stagnation that has no effect at all in co-op. Now let's read the second part. When Qiuyuan is the active resonator in the team, when exiting Ink Splash State of Mind, he deals arrow damage equal to 600% of his attack to all targets within range, considered echo skill damage. Yeah, honestly, this might be the worst S6 in the game. It's a 5-second CC followed by a 600% motion value. That's like bad for an S6. That's one of the worst S6s I've ever seen. If I'm frankly being honest with you, I don't think that's real. And if this is what it looks like when it launches, I'm actually going to be impressed because this S6 looks like a fucking disaster, if I'm going to be real with you. That's going to be the sequence notes. Like I said before, it's like combines like pay to lose and like new mechanics in the character's kit getting introduced in the sequence nodes that feels like they should be in the baseline kit. I'm skeptical about these. They almost seem like fan-made with how fucking weird they are. So we talked a lot about why his S6 kind of looks like doggy doo-doo water. There was actually another line of it that wasn't shown. Using that special skill that you get from S3 is going to additionally increase your critical damage by 100% for 6 seconds. I know we mentioned that the S6 kind of looks like dog shit. It did until we saw this part. That's the other thing, right? Is this S6 is like entirely dependent on his S3 to function. It's just more of kind of like the same, right? You added in this new ability in S3, and then his S6 directly interacts with it. At this point, it basically feels like this was in the baseline kit. And also, let's just be real here. 100% of a critical damage buff for 6 seconds is cool. But that I honestly don't think that's that particularly much because it's only 6 damn seconds. So, yeah. Again, I think his sequence nodes are kind of like the big thing over here to think about. Alrighty, Saint from the future here, ladies and gentlemen. It actually turns out that, well, the S3 that I was looking at, it wasn't really the full version of it. So when it comes to this whole Straw Cape and Drizzly Rain effect, we'll just continue on and break it down even further. We kind of ended off over here, right, with the 500% of Qiuyuan's attack considered as echo skill damage. It's also going to restore 4/6 of his Forte Circuit over here, and then start replacing some of his attacks, right? With the attacks in his chain, his Forte chain, that actually give him more of those points. So he's going to get much faster access to another one of his Forte enhanced heavy attacks, the entire Thus Spoke the Blade combo, and they're also going to gain a pretty big multiplier increase as well after using this effect. And the thing is that, well, when you consider the fact that his S6, like we just looked at before, is going to give that 100% extra critical damage, then it is going to be a lot stronger than the initial analysis that we had before. But once again, like I've always been saying, right? This is an ability that I think should have been built into his baseline kit, the ability to extend his rotation and make him play like more of a DPS. And then this sequence node, in my opinion, his S3 and his S6, should simply make that DPS ability stronger, as opposed to locking it off behind sequence nodes. And so I'll just say, you know, there's a little bit more to it. When he's not in co-op mode, then his outro skill is also going to get a bit of a buff as well. Deal an additional 500% damage when it's used after you extend this rotation. To me, like I said before, the initial analysis is still pretty much spot on. It functions like adding Ephemeral, Camellia's Forte Circuit, to Qiuyuan's kit. I just think it should be there at a baseline, and he should be a little bit more multi-rolled at S0. That's my take. It still hasn't changed, but just wanted to give you guys the full picture. And of course, right, it's all pre-release materials anyways. We'll get a much deeper examination once his kit is fully out. So yeah, Same for the future, out. Let's now take a look at the weapon. Emerald Sentence. It's going to give crit rate, which is going to be really good considering that Qiuyuan wants crit rate to be able to apply his crit damage buff to the team. And when it comes to its weapon effect, this is going to be at R1. It's going to increase attack by 12%. And then casting an Echo skill within 10 seconds after casting an Echo skill or a basic attack is going to grant 1 stack of Bamboo Cleaver, which gives you 30% heavy attack damage bonus. And this effect can be triggered by echoes of the same name once only. So he's got his own Echo skill, right? He's also got every single attack of Thus Spoke the Blade. So Qiuyuan's got 4 Echo skills built into his kit. It should be pretty easy for him to stack this up. And casting an Echo skill at max stacks does not reset the duration, and the effect can be triggered once every 10 seconds, do recall it lasts for 12 seconds, and ends early if the wielder is switched off field. There's a lot of complication built into here, but what's pretty clear is that you should be able to have max uptime of the effect for at least the 10 seconds, and Because it lasts for 12, you should be able to refresh it before the stacks expire. Second is casting an intro skill also grants a 20% echo skill damage bonus to all resonators in the team for 30 seconds. And so you're seeing over here, having this dude's weapon is actually going to be, at least for his main DPS playstyle, if he does have one, it's going to be pretty damn important. Because like we've been talking about before, he's actually got a lot of sources of actual abilities that deal echo skill damage in his kit. His weapon is going to grant some to the entire team, and then this buff from Bamboo Shade is also going to grant some to the entire team. I think total that's looking at about 50%. And that's also going to be in line, right, with the damage profile of a character like this, where Galbraith really wants echo skill damage bonuses, but there aren't a lot of ways to get them in the game currently. The best that Galbraith currently has right now is fusion damage bonuses from running her on Mono Fusion with Lupa. And outside of that, well, you're in a bit of a situation trying to find that damage type. But it looks like, clearly, Qiuyuan is going to be applying it and granting it in abundance. This is why I said, once again, he's one of the most future-proof units in the game, because the second that there is another on-field character that starts dealing echo skill damage on field and can benefit from his outro, and then also benefit from some of these team buffs, that he's probably going to be close to a best in slot, if not an actual best in slot for them. Frolova doesn't have as much synergy as you might think with him, because almost all of her echo skill damage is dealt from off field. And so when you're reading the terminology, nearby resonators on the team, well, his weapon gives it to everybody, but he has a lot of other buffs in his kit that focus entirely on, right, nearby resonators in the team. They got to be on field to activate it. And when it comes to Frolova, she's not actually on field when dealing a majority of her echo skill damage. But he's still got a lot of skill casts, and he still provides passive buffs through Law of Harmony, and so he'll probably still be a decent teammate with her. That's going to be our breakdown of Qiuyuan's kit. That's going to be our breakdown of all the different mechanics that are there. Like I said, I think that there's a very specific reason for why Kuro Games decided to hide him for this update, knowing that this is the first time that they've ever done this before, because, well, they've always been showing the kits since essentially the start of the game. And it hasn't become an issue until now. And then when I look at Qiuyuan's kit, and then I'm looking at his sequence nodes, and then I'm just seeing, these are some of the weirdest ones I've ever seen, specifically his S3 and his S6. I think I'm beginning to understand why, right, potentially, we're not actually seeing the final version in-game yet, when that's what we've seen for every other character. And I would hope that some additional work is done to, I don't know, like, this seems like something that I don't see why this can't just be added into his baseline kit, and then it just deals less damage. I think it could be added into his baseline kit, could just deal less damage, right? And then have his S3 buff it like crazy. Just like how Yuno's Full Moon Domain, right? This does no damage. 159.05%. That absolute fullness attack that she has at the end of her rotation, right? That conjures the Full Moon Domain. That does no damage. And then she gets a sequence node at S6 that boosts the multiplier by 1600%. I don't see why there can't be something similar for the S3, where it's just like, the S3 right now is gain this new ability that deals a fuck ton of damage. Can't the baseline ability just deal less damage? And then you get a massive buff on S3. That's my take. And when it comes to his S6, I don't even know what the fuck this is supposed to be. It literally works. His S6 literally looks worse than his S3. From the perspective of, there's less multiplier increases on S6, and then half of the effect doesn't even work in co-op. This just looks wrong. This just looks incorrect. That's my take on the kit. Once again, we'll be doing a thorough overview of the final version when it goes, you know, when Kuro actually announces it live. And I'm not gonna lie, I hope that there are some changes that do occur, because this situation over here is kind of ridiculous. That'll be that for this one, ladies and gentlemen. Once again, all of this is subject to change because, well, I'm just taking the fact that it's not showing up in the official menus as subject to change. And this was taken from the game on the 9th of October. Let me know what you all thought about this breakdown, what you all think about this character, and of course, what you think about those weird sequence nodes. And peace out.